Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 6th of October 2014, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. And behind the scenes on the technical desk is Nick. And we have a guest with us in the studio who will be sitting, listening and watching from the sidelines. Weather not too good, Mike.
It certainly wasn't pleasant overnight, that's for sure, and not too good in other parts of the country, it seems, today.
Howling gales overnight in the Plymouth area, which kept all the cats and dogs awake, and hence their owners, including us. We're told the weather's rubbish in Bedfordshire at the moment. We can't help you, but there are apparently a few sunny places, including Pembrokeshire, so the corgis will be smiling.
They seem to have pressed the autumn switch.
Yes, a few leaves on the ground. Things falling apart, basically. And leads us in nicely to the government and probably Francis Maude.
Yeah, Francis Fraud has announced new plans to reduce the number of government buildings in central London, and he's going to move more workspaces, he says, to the London suburbs. The number of government buildings in central London is planned to fall from 143 in 2010 to 23 shortly after 2020. And as it says here, Francis Fraud said, we're systematically dismantling government, replacing it with communitarian corporatocracy. So we don't need all these buildings anymore. We'll sell them to the lowest bidder, just as Gordon did with the gold. It's a fantastic deal for the taxpayer, who will no longer have to pay the running costs. I have no interest in the web of companies profiting from these sales. And of course, he didn't say that at all. What he actually said was, as part of our long-term economic plan, the government is cutting waste to save taxpayers millions. Since 2010, we've got out of property 26 times the size of Buckingham Palace and halved our government buildings in London. Hard-working families expect us to do more, and we will. Shortly after 2020, there will be just 23 government buildings in our capital, releasing surplus space for housing and businesses. And they also say that they're going to move departments from expensive Whitehall accommodation to the wider London boroughs, including Croydon and so on. So they're working with local authority partners to look at new location options like Stratford and Croydon, as I say. So that's brilliant, isn't it?
Well, this is totally dismantling government in our capital city. And of course, the UK column has been repeatedly saying London in the future will not be our capital city, because under the EU plans it will simply be a city region. So what you are watching, of course, is utter treason by Francis Maude and David Cameron and the rest of the team as they dismantle key public infrastructure and our system of government.
Indeed.
In front of our eyes.
Indeed. But it's okay. The Liberal Democrats are coming to our rescue because they have their conference on at the moment. And they're admitting what many other people have been saying for a very long time, that actually government policy at the moment is resulting in debt, which is not decreasing, as they said it would, but increasing. And this is from Paul Johnson, who's a director at the Institute for Fiscal Studies. And he's apparently speaking at the Liberal Democrat conference, and he's speaking on balancing the books, tax and spending choices in the next Parliament. And what he's basically highlighting is this situation here, which is pretty nasty, that the debt situation with government spending and interest payments and all the rest of the rubbish is increasing over the next 10 years rather than decreasing, which is what Osborne said. And he starts off by saying, we aren't supposed to be here. When George Osborne delivered the coalition's first budget in 2010, the plans he set out suggested that the job of rebalancing the nation's finances would be more or less complete by now, and so on. But what are his options? He gives four choices, and he says that none of these four choices are attractive. First, huge additional cuts to public service spending, taking us to the lowest level since 1948. Second, not being quite so nasty to public services, but making some big cuts to social security. And third, smaller cuts to spending and doing more to get debt under control. And fourth, substantial tax rises. But of course, he doesn't mention the fifth option, which is the Bradbury Pound. Which is really, under these circumstances, probably the only way that we're going to get ourselves out of this hole, is to produce our way out of it. Johnson doesn't consider this option, It's not on the table as far as he's concerned. The irony is that our totally collapsed health service, we'll come on to that in a second, our totally collapsed basic infrastructure gives us a platform that we could build from, but that's not on the cards. They would prefer to tear the country apart. Well, of course, if we implemented the Bradbury policy, we might have decent apprenticeships for our young people instead of the sad excuse for an apprentice scheme that we have, that Vince Cable is so proud that he's giving a £1 pay rise to. It's pathetic.
£1 a year?
Well,
sorry.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Anyway, shall we move on? Because as I say, the NHS is not getting what it needs. And this is an open letter called the Time Bomb Letter. And it's from a bunch of senior, really at the top of the tree as far as the NHS is concerned, to David Cameron, Ed Miliband, who else? Nick Clegg, who's he? And it says, "Dear Sirs, the National Health Service has provided world-class care, free at the point of use to the British people for 66 years. It was recently rated the most effective and most efficient healthcare system in the developed world, outperforming 10 of the world's richest countries, despite the UK spending only 9.6% of GDP on health, much less than most of those countries. Savings have been made, and despite the best efforts of nurses, doctors and other staff, patients have not been insulated from these cuts. Too many staff feel undervalued and demoralised when all they want is to be able to care
Blame
for
it on
patients.
the cat, Mike. You
Yes,
had a bad night's sleep.
I did have a bad night's sleep. But anyway, so he goes on to say, signs of the system buckling under the twin crises of rising demand and flatlining budgets are everywhere. A shortage of GPs means that patients are struggling to get an appointment to see their doctor, pressures on maternity services, and so on, and it goes on. The list could go on, he says, and they say, and the anxieties of people working on the front line of health and care services are well known. The NHS and our social care services are at breaking point, and things cannot go on like this. This will require a guarantee that the NHS will be protected, and so on. You get the point. The key point here is that, of course, this is outlining the problem which has really been created, deliberately created by successive governments over the last 40 years. The solution's got to be privatisation. I think that's got to be stopped. But of course, one other solution is on the table, because the assisted dying bill is back on the cards in the coming few weeks. And this article from the Mail over the weekend really highlighting the slippery slope that the people of the Netherlands are already on, because they've had euthanasia now in Holland for some time. Rather than giving people proper care and proper palliative care, better just to kill them. And now we see that, in fact, 42 people with mental illnesses were killed by lethal injection in Holland last year. So this is a massive rise, according to this article, and really, with the assisted dying bill coming in this country as well, that looks like one of the options on the table for sorting out the NHS.
What's really scary about this is, of course, this is where Nazi Germany started, with the killing off of people who had disabilities, mentally disabled in particular. The Nazi T4 program that was running in the late 30s. So if you haven't come across that before, you might like to look it up. T4 program, Nazi Germany. And that program, I think, dispatched of about 336,000 people in the time it was running. And what are we saying here in Holland? Well, it's getting a little bit out of control. Well, no, it's going in the direction clearly the governments want it to go in. And perhaps we should just give a mention on the subject to the NHS. Of course, it's only the UK column that has been warning about the penetration of common purpose in the NHS. And if you haven't seen the excellent article that our research group did, which is called Towards a Million Change Agents, that is a fantastic analysis of how common purpose has penetrated the NHS and simply destroyed the true management structure. Have a look at that on the UK column website, Towards a Million Change Agents. And I understand that we've now got some of the UKIP councillors and candidates showing interest in that particular article. So if you're in touch with people who are standing against any of the mainstream parties, perhaps you'd give them a nudge in that direction to have a look at that analysis. Well, no money for the good things in life, but plenty of money for prisons. And that must bring us to yesterday, when about 53 people turned out in Peterborough to show support for abuse victim Melanie Shaw, who of course is still in HM Prison Peterborough and has been there since the 25th of July. So we've got a few photographs here. This was the scene that greeted people coming along the main road at the back of the prison. And you can see that wonderful Free Melanie Shaw banner on the park fence. Interestingly enough, the area that we're all looking at there apparently was part of the steel mill complex. So at one time this was an area of great employment and productivity, albeit some pretty heavy, dirty work. Look at the government's new mix. So we've got an ultra-high security prison, private, being run for profit. And what do we put in front of it? We put the children's playing area. Well, here's the team that turned up, and we're going to say a big thank you to all these people. They came from far and wide, many people from London, south of London, the Plymouth team. We even had people down from Newcastle and many from the Midlands area. And they had done all this work themselves to produce the banners, and a few of them were carrying symbolic birthday presents because, of course, it's Melanie Shaw's birthday tomorrow. Well, let's have a look at a close-up. We did several impromptu talks on the subject of child abuse. There was not a single reporter from mainstream or local papers there, although there was one very nice gentleman who was a freelance photographer who turned up, listened intently, took a lot of photographs, and hopefully those photographs will be passed on. We'd also like to give a special thanks to the local policeman who turned up as a liaison officer. He spent a great deal of time talking to people there, asking why people had turned up, what was happening with Melanie. And it was really good to see so many conversations going on with this member of the local constabulary. And it was obvious that he was taking the information on board. He was also happy to take a copy of the UK column from Carol Bragg, so well done, Carol. And at the end of the day, it was quite interesting to hear what he had to say about the state of Britain's police forces. They can do the right thing when the right people are on the ground. But from the park area, we moved round to the front of the prison. So here is a shot. The little pink building to the centre of your picture is the main entrance to HM Prison Peterborough. So the well-wishers had moved through the car park, and we were kindly allowed into this car sales area. This is Winston Motors, and the significance of this is this was immediately adjacent to the prison wall in the vicinity of the women's wing. So everybody was there, and at an appropriate moment sang happy birthday to Melanie, who by coincidence was just the other side of this wall. This is the actual view. So this is the women's prison wing in the background. And Melanie was actually exercising the other side of that wall. So we did have some brief communication, which was really excellent. Let's remember what this prison is doing. They claim they're providing quality of life services. This is Sodexo. They're providing quality of life services for child abuse victims, and presumably that's why Melanie has been bullied, denied medication, and locked up in solitary confinement for long periods. But we should probably end this by saying, let's remember who is really guilty for the abuse that Melanie is currently suffering. It has to be the Home Secretary, Theresa May. This is the woman who has allowed the CPS to put Melanie in this prison, still on remand with no evidence. This is the woman who is failing to do the full investigations into child abuse, and presumably she's just too busy slipping on a little slinky black number and attending yet another establishment dinner. Pretty sickening stuff, but thank you very much, everybody that turned up, and an especial big thanks to, I'm going to say, to Louise Collins and all the others who put all that wonderful information on the Free Melanie Shaw Facebook page. We'll put up some of the photographs later today with a bit of extra comment. I'd like to also just give a reminder that Maria Miller MP was yet another of these MPs who show false interest. Here was a tweet saying, "Oh, please email me to see what I can do to help." So Maria Miller was provided with basic information. Come back and we'll give you more information. We're very happy to work with you. But a couple of days later, oh dear, Melanie Shaw's case had been put in the pending tray. So it's pretty obvious what's going on in Parliament. You either turned a blind eye to paedophilia, or you are presumably actively working to protect paedophiles, because paedophilia is the means by which the blackmail occurs. And of course, that's how Parliament is controlled. So the police, of course, playing their part in this whole scam. North of the border, the Police Scotland have said that they're actually going to set up yet another task force to target the sexual abuse of children. But we noted the newspeak by the Assistant Chief Constable, Malcolm Graham. He says both the Rape Task Force and the Domestic Abuse Task Force have been successful in terms of identifying the skills needed to target these specific crimes, and in working more closely with a range of partners. So if you analyse what the man has actually said, he really hasn't said anything apart from the fact we're having a look at how we might do something. And they're also after changes to make it easier for them to secure risk of sexual harm orders. Now this is clearly material that's being used at the low end of the spectrum. So of course Grampian Police completely failed to investigate the Holly Gregg abuse, therefore there's no crime. We're now in 2014 and the Scottish Police are simply saying, well, we've done a review into how well we've done in looking into the thing in the first place. Yes. Well, The Guardian seems to have picked it up, or at least one of their reporters. So thank you to the viewer who alerted us to this one. Widespread sexual abuse in Rotherham has caused outrage, but little action. While the alleged abusers still walk free, many victims lack support, legal aid, or even police protection from the men they've accused. And the journalist, Samira Ahmed here, comes up with a number of very good points. She says, as I write, the police have yet to arrest any of the alleged abusers of the women I met. All have reported them. There is no organised support for any of the survivors or their families. She said there is no organised campaign for compensation. It's pure chance whether these young women have a decent lawyer to fight their case or not. Many don't. Some are being threatened anew by their former abusers for speaking out. My goodness, that sounds a bit like Melanie Shaw. They compare stories on the phone about, this is the women, the victims, who received protection measures from the police after seeking help and who has been denied them. And finally, many of the victims are still struggling with the counsel. Holly Archer is 17 now. She was abused from the age of 13 by 5 men. After the council placed her in foster care, the abusers were all white and the council never tried to stop it. She's trying to get her baby back from the council, which wants to have him adopted. So this lady's finally picking up on the reality of the system out there. Step forward as an abuse victim and you can expect more abuse and you can expect your children taken away. Exactly the same scam that has happened to Melanie Shaw, of course.
Azra in the chat box saying that somebody called Lynn from Coventry has just found herself in HMP Peterborough following having made allegations of paedophilia to the police. We need to get more details on that because I don't know about that case, but he's arguing that HMP Peterborough is almost becoming a concentration camp for paedophile whistleblowers at the moment.
Well, it's a very interesting prison, Mike, apart from the fact it's there obviously to make profit from the quality of life that it gives child abuse victims. Also understand that the governor had more than a little problems in his job with the prison service, but despite those indiscretions, he was then given this prime job with this high-profile prison, HMP Peterborough.
So you do a bad job in the civil service and then go straight into the private sector, get paid a fortune for doing an equally bad job.
Well, I'm going to say that is what I believe at the moment. We know we're going to get some further information on that story in due course, but it's quite an interesting one. And meanwhile, the Savile case just dribbles on because it's quite clear that Britain's police are working as hard as possible to protect the real abusers. But the Mail online here at least starting to expose Surrey police, who've casually admitted that they were told Savile was a paedophile back in 2003, but did nothing, no crime number, nothing ever done. They're so worried about their own lack of ability to investigate crime that they've asked for another police force to come in and to see whether they did make any more mistakes. But what's interesting in the Daily Mail's article is that they have a little embedded video clip with this gentleman, Chris Cloke, and he's the NSPCC Child Protection Professional expert. And our simple question is, what has NSPCC been doing all these years with their partners? Because it's quite clear that NSPCC stands up to say, well, we're a wonderful charity working hard to protect children from abuse. But in fact, they're working in partnership with all the safeguarding teams that are failing in the first place. If you haven't come across them before, have a look at the website. This is the sort of thing NSPCC says, using all our legal powers. And this is very important because they boast that they're actually given powers which are normally only given to local authorities. So what are you dealing with? This is quasi-government, isn't it? Third sector. And if you have a look at this bit down here, they are boasting about how they have been helping to make the world-class child protection system, which has been failing over many, many years. And they're going to use their authority to challenge decisions which we believe put children at risk. So, armed with that statement, we contacted NSPCC earlier this morning. We followed it up with an email, but we've asked for a personal telephone conversation with this gentleman. You can see him on screen, Mr. Brown. He's got the lead on tackling sexual abuse, and we wish to speak to him in person, to ask him in person what NSPCC has been doing and is doing to support both Melanie Shaw and Mickey Summers and all the other abuse victims who are reporting documents lost, bullying, harassment and victimisation by Nottinghamshire City and County Councils, the very authorities with whom NSPCC would appear to have been working. So we'll let you know how that goes. The email went off shortly before the programme today. We're looking forward to getting a reply from NSPCC and a date and a time for our personal conversation with Mr. Brown. So stay with us on that one. Where's it going to head? Well, it's quite clear. Germany's showing the lead at the moment. But this is a very interesting article which is now saying that, organisations in Germany are beginning to consider making incest legal. And of course, the UK column has been predicting that following incest, we're going to see a drive by the three main parties in this country to make paedophilia normal. It's a little bit of a mucky website, this one, but the information is here. And so here we've got a brother and his sister. And if you read through this article, it's talking about the German Ethics Council. They're arguing that genetic risks to a child from an incestuous relationship are not really significant enough to justify the law. So it's a bit of fuss over nothing, really. And Yep, let's legalise incest.
That was sarcasm.
It was, just in case there's any doubt. But I would encourage you to have a look at the article because it is so shocking, but it shows where these governments are going. Also, have a look at the website itself, which is very unusual, a new type of media company bringing audiences hidden perspectives, unheard voices and original ideas from around the world. When I first looked on this website, there was another article which was saying, is it acceptable for a man to have a sexual relationship with his dog? So this is clearly a cutting-edge website. I think, what is it doing? Skewing public opinion pretty quickly. But some people are on the watch, and north of the border, we've got an increasing number of people now picking up on the fact that Alex Salmond's junta under Sir Stephen House, head of Police Scotland, have been working as fast as possible to arm police in Scotland. And this article from the West Highland Free Press is showing criticism from the public because in a fairly isolated area, this has occurred up in Inverness, but a father took his child to an event, all very innocent, out in the country, really miles from anywhere, but oh dear, there were armed Scottish police there. And others have been taking this up. I apologise for using a BBC source here, but if you go to this BBC iPlayer, you can actually hear questions being put in First Minister's question, and at 21 minutes 51 seconds, Graham Pearson is raising the issue of police guns in the Scottish Parliament. So, welcome to Scotland. This gives us a glimpse as to where we're going to be heading in England fairly shortly. These are the sorts of weapons that Mr. Salmond thinks the police need in Scotland. So, as well as automatic weapons and handguns, of course, they're also using tasers and whatever an attenuating energy projectile launcher is. So, very dangerous stuff. And this is this was brought up to us that the police don't want to say how many guns they have, nor the number of rounds. Now, if this was
they got them from Libya?
Well, if this was the military, you could possibly understand it because you know how many guns they've got, you know how many rounds, you can start to calculate how you're going to overcome that army. But is somebody going to say, well, I'm thinking of raiding a bank, I think I need to be armed. If the police have got 20,000 automatic weapons, I'll do it. If they've got 40,000, I won't. So why are the police hiding the number of weapons and rounds? Could it just be, as in England, that they have so many tens of thousands, people would start to say, this has got to be for suppression of the public. And here's some statistics kindly provided for us. And what this is showing is the fact that from 1996-97, where there was change in legislation around firearms in Scotland, the number of offences started to drop. And as you can see, from about 2006-07, a significant drop until 2012-13. But it's at this lowest point ever that Alex Salmond and Sir Stephen House have wanted to bring in yet more armed officers. And if we look at it a different way, in this graph, we've got firearms offences in dark blue versus population. And the one that I've circled there relates to the original article that we first homed in on, where the father had complained about the police being armed at an event in Inverness. And the significance here is that the statistic for that northern area shows that the number of offences desperately low.
The lowest in the whole country.
Indeed. So what's going on north of the border? The police are being armed, single police force. This can only be for one reason, suppression of the population. But maybe the Sun gets a bit of credit at the moment, Mike, do you think?
Well, what they're highlighting here is the use of the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, the overuse of it, the improper use of it in order to try and identify who is speaking to journalists. And in a similar way, similar question really to why would you need to arm your police force whenever the population is using the amount of armed crime is at an ever lower amount. But in this case, we have the police clearly concerned about what is being published in the mainstream media. And they feel that they need to try to identify the people that are talking to journalists at the moment.
Yeah.
So they're breaking the law. They're using RIP A to try and identify these people. And
this follows the pattern, doesn't it? With Robert Greene, you arrest him and then basically you wipe all of his evidence out of his house. So this is a fairly common theme. Fit somebody up or arrest them, get into the house, remove all the evidence, particularly if the evidence is against the police themselves.
Well, I get the feeling that half of the approaches that come from MPs and so on are just to find out who has what information, and it's almost like an evidence gathering exercise. But anyway, the Press Gazette here published this because it's really their campaign, and so they were calling for that. Now the Liberal Democrats, they have their conference on at the moment. They have now made it Liberal Democrat policy that the police should not be allowed to use this act in the way that it has been used.
So this is the split government, Mike, isn't it? We don't have a single government view. We've got a government divided against itself.
Well, the problem that Nick Clegg has, of course, is that the Liberal Democrats have no centralised control over their policy. That's decided at conference, and so if it's passed at conference, it's passed. So he has relatively little centralised control over what his party's policies are, but then he just goes ahead and ignores those whenever he's actually in government, of course. So that's that. What can you say? The Sun is calling for a public hearing. Perhaps this is another area where a grand jury could be used. I don't know.
I'd say so. Well, this one is of great interest, and we've homed in on the Mail, although it's been reported in a number of other papers. On the surface, it looks a bit of a joke. Basically, an ex-warship captain is suing the Ministry of Defence for £300,000 after he was exposed for bullying because he claims it was a breach of his human rights. So this commander, we should have a picture of him here. This happened some time ago, but basically he was removed from his ship, HMS Somerset, if I'm correct, when the ship got to Gibraltar, because a male officer and a female officer had basically phoned a helpline to say that all was not well on board. And there was an investigation, and very quickly the investigation said that this man's position was untenable, so the bullying claims were upheld, and he was removed from his ship. Now, this is a very, very serious offence, not only for a captain to be effectively removed from his command, but the fact that, of course, if you have bullying going on inside a warship, there's nowhere for people to run, so it can be a pretty vicious environment, particularly if this sort of thing is coming from the man at the top. But because the story was leaked, he's now basically got his knickers in a twist, and he says, well, basically, it's spoilt my reputation, it's caused me distress, anxiety, and my family have read it and other people. It's damaged my reputation. And so he's now going to sue for $300,000. Now, if you look into the story, of course, at the back of it, we've got Hacked Off, because we've got Hugh Tomlinson QC from Hacked Off, who helped to, form the writ. And so this man who was removed his ship for bullying has now become the victim, and he's going to be suing the Ministry of Defence. So here they are, Hacked Off. Of course, UK column blew the whistle on what this little group were doing with the Media Standards Trust and the drive-through for Leveson inquiry. Here's the gentleman mentioned in the article, and I didn't realise till I saw his picture here that he is, of course, Matrix Chambers, and I think, if my memory serves me correctly, this is Sherry Blair's outfit. So a reputable law firm, of course, and these are the people who, in our opinion, are campaigning to destroy press freedoms. If you're filthy rich, and or establishment. You can do as you like. Nobody must know what you're up to. You need to be protected.
So, I mean, this also has to be seen in the context of removing events from Google search, as is now possible.
Yeah.
If you're rich enough and so on, you can have your past misdemeanors removed from Google search, and they are campaigning for those misdemeanors not to appear in the press in the first place.
Yeah, and of course, let's bring it back. Common Purpose, David Bell, Julia Middleton, leading through to the setup of the Media Standards Trust, which then creates Hacked Off. And of course, it was David Bell that jumped across from Common Purpose and the Media Standards Trust to be Lord Leveson's senior panel member. So no conflict of interest there. And Media Standards Trust, Common Purpose, helped set up Hacked Off, which then lobbied for control of the press. And I'll just mention to the live audience today, still no reply from Sir Alan Moses to my email to him about his conduct as chairman of IPSO, but we'll keep you posted on that. Why do we need to pay attention to what the media is up to? Well, let's come in at this angle. And the Mirror here reporting an article, again, most people I think will laugh at, but British try to win Taliban hearts and minds by broadcasting an Afghan version of The Archers. And the programme that's been put out is called New Home, New Life, and it's gone out to about 14 million people. And if we have a look at the comments in the article, it says it touched people's lives. It was giving out information in a very subtle way, but it was popular because it was based on the lives of characters in Afghan villages who people could relate to. The impact was huge. And here we've got the Foreign Office giving 300,000 towards the programme in 2007-8, and a similar figure in the previous 14 years. Now think what that wording is saying. Subtle, this is nudging, this is applied behavioural psychology, and of course the average Afghani villager, no defence against this very sophisticated propaganda being pumped in by the BBC. So this is not some light-hearted article, this is government propaganda, British government propaganda, and innocent people in Afghanistan being targeted. This is vicious.
Were the BBC involved in this?
Well, since it's The Archers, I would think they've got to be in there somewhere, but we'll do a bit more digging. But I just wanted to remind people of this. Only the UK column that's been pulling media action apart. Here's the BBC so-called charity. And in this analysis that we did, Subversion from Broadcasting House, you can read in great detail how the BBC was going into Kazakhstan in order to manipulate public opinion to get them to reject the communist lifestyle and head towards life where the bankers control everything. Blatant propaganda, and this was part of the UK column news analysis we did, showing of course that BBC monitoring were working hand in glove with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, so no change there with Afghanistan. And here was this, I'm going to say, dirty little charity actually working to push out yet more propaganda in your face.
Yep. Okay, so, well, along the same lines, I suppose Denmark has now joined the group of countries sending jets to battle ISIS. They're going to send jets over to do battle with ISIS in Iraq. We're going to blow up a few more cars or something. But interesting little article that we completely missed from a couple of weeks ago that I just wanted to highlight, because this is the Telegraph saying how Qatar is funding the rise of Islamist extremists. And at first point I'd like to make, of course, is that I think it's probably at least 8 or 9 months ago that Patrick Henningsen was making exactly this point on this programme, that Qatar has been funding these extremists, and he was pretty clear as to where which extremists they were funding and so on. But this is by David Blair and Richard Spencer, and they're saying that this fabulously wealthy Gulf state, which owns an array of London landmarks and claims to be one of our best friends in the Middle East, is a prime sponsor of violent Islamists. And really his point here seems to be that it's really a bit ironic, he says, that that Qatar, which is one of our great friends, is funding one of our great enemies. It's only ironic if you think that that's really what's going on, that there is any irony in it at all. Because, of course, the point that we've been making for a very long time is that all roads lead back to London in this case, and perhaps the Foreign Office is involved in that. I have a question that I would encourage anybody to help me research if you can, and that is how much of the money flow that's coming out of Afghani opium is going through Qatar. I would like to know the answer to that. I'm going to be looking into that over the next couple of weeks. If anybody wants to help, please do get in touch. But glad to see the mainstream media finally catching up.
Slow, but maybe they are beginning to get there.
Yes. Right, so the Bank of England, this is really good news. Yes, the Bank of England is going to protect deposits of up to £1 million under new rules, according to the Telegraph. And this is a spectacular piece of propaganda, really, because it's not really what they're going to do at all. So good news, Bank of England has outlined plans for money to be protected if a bank fails that could see companies take deposits from the, sorry, I've misplaced a page there. But anyway, so what's going on here? What they're saying is if customer at Bank A would see his savings move to Bank B if Bank A was to collapse. And additionally, it says deposits of £1 million would be protected in certain circumstances, and that's the key point. But of course, the headline doesn't say that. So this can only happen really since the recent changes which decoupled bank accounts from banks, pretty much in the same way as with the energy cartels. So you can switch from one provider to another, in this case from one bank to another. And so it seems that what they're saying is that if a bank goes under, then basically they'll just move your account from that failing bank to another bank. But it's only towards the end of the article that a hint of the truth begins to break cover, because actually it'll only apply to smaller banks. So larger banks like Lloyds, RBS and so on would be sorted out via a bail-in mechanism, which is, we've been pointing out, has been policy for quite some time now. And as for the £1 million guarantee, well, the Bank of England says that would only apply in certain circumstances. For example, when the money is in an account for a deposit on a house, or if it's been recently paid in as a result of personal injury compensation, but otherwise it wouldn't be covered. So in reality, not too much changes, and it should be said, of course, that this wonderful press release comes on the day that the so-called ring fence comes into effect. So this is the half-hearted attempt at splitting the banks up, where basically they say that the retail sections of a banking group and casino sections of a banking group would have to have separate boards, separate chairmen, separate operations. There's supposed to be a ring fence, which means that they can't talk to each other, but of course they will, won't they?
Well, they always do. It's
yes.
a scam.
Finally, then, of course, a hack attack apparently into JP Morgan Chase and 10 financial firms. This is a major assault. Guess who's responsible for this major assault?
Come on.
Russia.
Okay.
Russia, yeah. Because
Putin, probably himself.
Well, quite possibly, yes. So this is an absolutely spectacularly huge hack, apparently, from Russia. And Russia needs to be blamed for that. And but of course, we would never hack any foreign nation, would we? We didn't hack Iran at all. Ever. Stuxnet was nothing to do with the West. It was probably another Russian hack, in fact. So anyway, that's all Russia's fault, and no doubt this is going to justify Russia being separated from the rest of the global financial system, as they're threatening to do at the moment. So they're basically threatening, on top of sanctions, to make sure that there could be no electronic bank transfers to and from Russian banks using the SWIFT banking system. So no doubt this will be another nail in the coffin for Russian banking.
Trouble on its way.
Yes.
Well, what are we going to do about it? Quite easy, really. Stick to the Constitution.
Well,
stick
indeed.
to common law.
Yes.
Get back to issuing money as credit.
Credit. Anybody needs to understand what that means, and Justin's going to explain some of that at this conference. And of course, the constitutional reform agenda moving ahead apace. They are absolutely destroying what's left of common law and attempting to bring in this global law system. And we're going to be talking a bit more about that over the next few days. The big global law conference coming up, which we're going to tell you about. But in the meantime, if you want to do something about it, get yourselves along to this conference, and don't forget the second conference the day afterwards, the health conference. All the details at doomwatch.biz.
There we are. Okay, well, thanks very much for joining us. It's all there in front of our faces. The key, we believe, is the child abuse, understand the child abuse, understand the scale of it, and the establishment figures who are involved and promoting it, and we start to see the source of the criminality at the heart of the British government. From then on, you can trust nothing, whether they're talking about the NHS, the economy, schools, roads, defence, it doesn't matter. With people like Francis Maude in charge of transparency in David King Cameron's government, you can be sure we're not going to see a lot. So we can get into Afghanistan, we can nudge local villagers to believe that London and David Cameron is a wonderful man helping to bring peace in the world. Truth, obviously, very different. And Melanie Shaw's birthday tomorrow. If you've sent a card, thank you very much. You can email her if you choose to. Please don't forget her. She'll be due in court on the 13th of October for yet another directions hearing. We don't know whether that will be a star chamber, a secret court, and her hearing in front of a jury should be the 27th of October. So please stay with her, and Mickey Summers, of course, because if we can get the lid off the abuse around these two, we'll be well on our way to pinpointing the abusers in government. Thanks for joining us. See you same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.